Hello, hello everyone. Just going to give a chance to everybody to join. Feel free to say hello in the chat and let me know that you're here and that you're watching, and say hello. Thank you all for tuning in. I'm going to give everybody a chance to join. I have an assistant here, a furry friend. He might bark every once in a while just because he thinks that I'm cooking all this food for him. And it's not for you. Can everybody hear me all right? How's this sound? Does it sound all right for everybody? Don't jump up. Hello. Let's see, can someone post something in the comments just so I can see if I can read them? If anybody has any questions while we go along, feel free to ask as we go along. Yes, thank you, Penny. Hello. Excellent. You can hear me perfectly? All right. I'll give it just another second before we start, just to get some people joining in. Hello, hello, hello. Let's see, we'll say hello to my co-star here. If you hear a dog, or if I all of a sudden say no to somebody that you can't see, it's because he thinks that this is for him. This is not for you. But Daddy, are you cooking dinner? Is that for me? No. So I've got a little assistant. I've got my assistant, and hopefully he stays quiet during the whole thing. All right, so I hope you all were able to have, his name is Stanley. Stanley, yes. I hope you were all able to have a look at the recipe. So what we're doing with the recipe today is we're doing a chicken thigh egg fried rice. So why I chose chicken thigh is I want to give you guys some ideas of what to do if you have, yes, I'll sing you ABBA songs, is to give you ideas of what you can do with a full chicken. It may seem daunting to somebody that doesn't have experience of buying a whole chicken. But when I buy a whole chicken, I have 2-3 meals planned out ahead of time and what I can do with those bits of the chicken. And buying a whole chicken is a lot cheaper than buying just chicken breasts. And ultimately, I like the chicken thighs the best. So what I think about this recipe is, in my mind, I envision, so you have a whole chicken, and let's say it's Sunday lunch and you roast that whole chicken off. Then you use the breasts for the meal, but then what can you do with the chicken thighs? So we can use those chicken thighs for the next day's meal. And also with egg fried rice, we like to use pre-cooked rice, cooked and chilled. So what I usually do is I'll cook a meal, and it'll be like chicken and rice or something like that, and I'll have a whole chicken. And then I'll take the breast and I'll cook some rice that night, and we'll have chicken, rice, and veg for that night's dinner. And then the next day I'll take the leftover rice that I had from there, because I purposely cook too much. And then I'll take the chicken thighs and then I'll make it into that day's meal. So one whole chicken is a lot cheaper than buying, just chicken breasts. It's a lot cheaper to buy a whole chicken, and you can make 2 meals out of it. And then what I also do is I like to take the bones and the carcass and make chicken stock. But that's a little bit more advanced for this video, but just to let you know that we use every part of the chicken, and buying a whole chicken can be very, very beneficial if you know how to use it. All right, so egg fried rice, very, very simple. I'm sure you've all had it in your Chinese takeaway many times. And it can have lots of different types of ingredients, and it can be cooked many, many different ways. But basically what it is we can use it to use the leftovers of what we had the night before. So maybe you had a Sunday roast and you have lots of leftover beef. You could chop that up really fine and cook that the next day in a fried rice, or you had some pork or whatever. It's a good dish to use up extra things. All right. And it's very, very simple. And once you know how to do it, it's very simple, and it's a dish that you can pull out very easily. And rice is very simple. So for the basics of this dish, day-old rice is always the best to use for egg fried rice. So what I like to do is, like I said, I cook a dinner the night before. I cook a whole chicken. I use the breasts for that night's dinner, and then I cook a lot of rice, and then I cool down what's left over, and I cool down the bits of chicken that I didn't use, and then that's tomorrow's tea sorted. And I said tea like a good Britishman. All right, so let's talk about some of the ingredients that we have. So like I said, the fun thing about cooking is once we know how to cook, we can interchange different ingredients. So if you don't like peppers, or if you don't like spicy, you can always change it out and use different things. So that's the fun thing about cooking, is it's the method, it's the process of how we cook. And then once we know how to cook, we can use different ingredients in places of other ingredients. So this is just going to be a really, really simple egg fried rice. So we're just going to be using some onions, which I don't currently have any onions in the house because thank you COVID, but I have some shallots. So shallots and onions are very similar, but shallots we tend to use more because they have more flavor. A white onion can be a bit boring, but a shallot will have more flavor. And then we'll have some freshly chopped garlic, some ginger. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get any fresh ginger, but I was able to get some crushed ginger, such as the times of Morrison's home delivery, where you don't always get what you put on your order. And then we just have some peppers, some spring onions, and some things like that. And then we have the rice that I cooked ahead of time. And then I have the chicken that I cooked yesterday. And then we're gonna have the scrambled eggs, and we're gonna have peas, okay? So what I thought would be fun is to show you guys a little bit of knife skills and do a little bit of chopping for you. I will say that there's no necessarily wrong way to chop a pepper. I guess there is a wrong way, but everybody kind of has their own unique style. Every chef will chop something a little bit different. What I've done in my career is I've chopped so many onions and so many peppers and things. I've, seen what was the fastest and kind of just did that way. So I'll show you how I chop some things. So we're gonna do a little bit of chopping. I'm gonna show you the chicken thighs that I cooked ahead of time and what we can do with that meat. And after we do a bit of chopping, what type of rice do we use? That's a bit of a kind of a cultural thing. We tend to like to use a bit of a shorter grain rice. But if you were to use like a basmati, longer grain rice, it wouldn't mess it up too much. If anybody has any questions about how to cook their rice, feel free to let me know. I have a rice cooker. You may say, why does a chef own a rice cooker? Because rice cookers are amazing and you set it and forget it. But if you want to know more about cooking rice, let me know. Possibly when I do some more videos, I'll have some different ideas and you guys can chime in of what you want to learn how to cook. But as far as cooking the rice right now and cooking the chicken and making a video live, I don't think we all want to stand here for 2 hours watching me cook. So I did do those last night, but like I said, it's last night's leftovers. So tonight's dinner is last night's leftovers if we play it smart, okay? All right, so give me just a second and I'm gonna switch camera views. You might see a finger or two while I just switch this camera because it's not the most professional setup. All right. How does that look? Everybody see that all right? That look okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do is just show you a little bit of technique of how I chop some of the vegetables and things like that, just to kind of give you an idea. Not saying that you're doing it wrong, but we can always use some tips and tricks and kind of work better and work smarter, not harder, okay? Just grabbing some of the ingredients now. So like I said, I'm going to use some shallots, and you can probably see a dog's face here because he wants to know what I'm chopping. Hello, Stanley. Yes, it's not for you. All right. So, when we chop a shallot, it's very similar to when we chop an onion, so it's not gonna be too different. So what I like to do is take off the top here, and my phone is falling down. Secure that again. Sorry about that. All right. So I'm gonna take the top off the shallot and cut it in half. So this will be very similar to an onion. A shallot is similar to an onion, but shallot is like an onion on steroids. It has a lot more flavor. And we tend to use shallots more when we make sauces. So if I was to make, say, a peppercorn sauce with shallots, the flavor would be a lot better than just using onions. So a lot of times if I make a beurre blanc, or even like if I'm doing a salad dressing and I like to put shallots in it, over onions, because you're going to get a nicer flavor with shallots. But it's what you have in the house. Unfortunately, I don't have any onions because COVID. So what I like to do is I cut it in half, I leave the stem on, and I'm just going to give it one cut through this way, and then I'm just going to cut some long slices this way. So that was one cut that way, and then a few cuts this way. And then, if I slice it like this, that's some very nice, finely diced shallots there. All right. So one more time. Right down through the side there. Some long slices through this way. And make sure, if you're chopping, keep your fingers curled in like this. So if I hold my food, I keep my fingers curled in, there's no way that I'm gonna slice my fingers there. And if you're curious about the knife that I'm using, this is a Chinese cleaver. I like to use it for chopping vegetables because it's got a nice, smooth cut through the vegetables. You never want to use a paring knife. Let me grab a paring knife. So let's pretend that we're trying to chop a shallot with a paring knife, and then I'm making lots of really small cuts, and I'm trying to cut this way, but my fingers are touching the chopping board. So if I'm trying to cut it, my fingers are gonna touch the chopping board. But with the knife like this, I can put the knife all the way down, and my fingers don't touch. And then I also like to use this knife because it's also very good for being a scoop. So once I chopped all that shallot, I can have my little container here, and then I can just use the knife as a little tool to get everything off the chopping board that I just chopped, nice and easy into there. I really like using this type of knife at home when I'm cooking and doing a lot of vegetable prep. Us chefs, we have a knife for everything. All right, so one chop down the side. Some chops down that way. And then keeping my fingers nice and folded away, curved in, we get a nicely diced shallot there. And then I can take my knife and just slide it onto there. Okay, so we have a few more ingredients to chop. All right, so what I'm gonna chop next is some garlic. So what I like to do is I have a few cloves of garlic and I'll break one open, and then I'll have a little plastic container that I keep in the fridge that just has my spare things of heads of garlic, cloves of garlic. So there's a lot of tips and tricks and things that you can do with this. A lot of people will smash it first. I find that a bit harder to get a nice chop. So what I usually do is I'll take the butt end here and I'll kind of just chop it, not all the way through, but I'll just kind of chop it most of the way through. And then I'll pull it away. Don't put it in my good bin. And then that will give me a little bit of purchase when I want to take the rest of the skin off. All right, so one more time. So just through the butt, just a little bit. I'm not cutting all the way through because when I pull the butt away, I want it to take away some of that skin with it. There's a few gadgets that you can use with this, like they have the garlic rollers and things like that. They kind of work, but once you learn how to do it properly, you don't really need all the fancy gadgets. So once again, just through the butt. I'm not going to cut it all the way through. And you see when I pull the butt away, it gave away that big piece of skin, so that makes it easier to pull it away. Also, if you kind of dig your nail in, if it's kind of not wanting to come apart, you can kind of dig your nail in there. All right. All right, this one is a little bit more sticky. All right, so I'm gonna clean up the chopping board a little bit because nobody wants the skin in there. So how do we make this nicely diced? So if we were to try to use a paring knife and you're trying to get it nice and chopped fine, it's not gonna work because in order for the blade to cut all the way through, it's gonna stop with our fingers there. So we need to use a knife. It doesn't necessarily have to be a knife like this, but we wanna be able to have the knife completely touch the chopping board without our fingers touching the board. So this is very similar to the way that I did the shallot. So I take the garlic lengthwise and I just do one slice down the middle there. You could definitely do this a lot finer than the way I'm gonna show you, but I find this perfectly fine for what I like to do. So then I do one slice that way, then a few slices that way, and then just like the shallot, I'm gonna do some fine chops this way. And I'm just gonna throw away the butt. And even just like that, one pass through was very nicely chopped. It's not like a mince or anything like a paste, but if you end up chopping your garlic too fine, you run the risk of burning it too quick. So if you do it with a paste, the smaller that it's chopped, the quicker that it might burn if you're cooking it in a pan. If it's a little bit bigger, the less chance that it's gonna burn. One slice down that way, then 2 or 3 slices that way, and then some nice fine slices through that way. And it's not the most finely minced. I could run my knife through this a few more times, but I find that just fine. And then I can take this nice big knife like that and then use it as a little scoop for what I want to put in that little mise en place bowl. All right, I'm just gonna give this a little rinse because garlic is nice and sticky. All right, and the key to working clean is like in between jobs. If you need to give your chopping board a quick little wipe down, feel free. We work clean as we go along, so you don't have to do a whole bunch of cleaning up at the end. All right, so the next thing that we're gonna chop is some peppers. All right, so I'm not gonna need this whole pepper. So what I'm gonna do is just cut it to where it's in a few small pieces and then I can use as much as I need. So what I like to do, so if you look at the pepper, I like to take the top off a little bit here, and a little bit of that went on the floor. I'm sure the dog will have a sniff. We can use that for other things. And then, so we got a flat surface for it to sit down on. And then I like to take off sides like this. And I'm gonna take just enough to where I don't get too much of the pith on the inside of the pepper, and try to get as much of just the flesh as I can. If you're really trying to use up every bit of the pepper, we can chop off the front of it here and use these little pieces here like that. If Adam's watching, this is what I do every day at work, and I'm not wasting any vegetables, so don't worry about that. But at home, if you're not worried about having a little bit of extra leftovers, then that's fine. So I think about half of this is going to be okay. All right, so if we chop a pepper now, we've got a nice flat pepper to chop now. You can chop it this way down. If you chop it this way, you're going to be pushing through that skin first, and you're going to kind of get some resistance and then go through. I like to chop it this way because we chop through the soft first and then the skin, and so we're able to slice through it a little bit easier. If you do it the other way, you have to go through that thicker skin first, and it can be a little bit resistive. So I just sliced it that way, and now I've got them all lined up. And if I want to slice a nice brunoise, which is a nice small dice here, to hold them all together. All right, so just like that, we got a nicely diced pepper here. And the way that I'm going to cook is I'm going to do the shallots first, and then I'm going to add the garlic and the pepper. So I'm going to keep the shallots separate, and then I'm going to add the peppers to the garlic, because you run the risk of, if you add the garlic in too soon, that you could get it a little bit too cooked a little too much and get a bit burned or a bit crispy. So I like to add that a bit after. And I've got a full thing of 3 peppers, but I'm just going to use the 2 just because it's a bit overkill. So I'm just going to, again, I took off the top here, set it down like that, slice through just enough to get the meat of the pepper on the outside. So I've got 4 nice flat pieces of peppers to work with. And if you ever did a day in the kitchen, you'll know that we use a lot of peppers. So this is just 1 pepper. Imagine having to do a whole box of these, because that will happen on curry day. So nicely thin sliced. This would be really good in a salad, just like this. So slice it through. And what we're going to try to do is everything that we chop, we're going to try to make it a uniform size, because we want everything that we cook, that we put into the pan, to be relatively the same size, because if we put things in different sizes, they're going to cook at different times. So as much as we can do, we're going to try to cut them uniformly. All right. Okay, and the last thing that I'm going to show you here cutting wise is some spring onions. This is going to be a garnish at the end of the dish. The spring onions are very delicate. If I was to add these at the beginning of the cooking process, they would just cook to mush. So these are a bit of a garnish at the end. So what we like to do is lay them flat. If there's a bit of pieces that are a bit floppy, a bit brown, you can peel them away and get the nice big pieces. So let's say that we don't like that piece there. We can kind of just pull that down and get a nice piece. And spring onions are kind of the topping, the nice finishing flavor. So these won't go until the end, but I'm going to slice them now just because we're getting our mise en place ready. So we want everything ready to go before we start cooking. The thing about Asian cooking, Chinese cooking in woks and things is the actual cooking process is very, very, very fast. So you want to have everything that you're going to need to hand, because the cooking process of the egg fried rice, once you start cooking, is going to be 2, 3, 4 minutes. So you're not going to have time to be like, oh crap, I didn't slice this. By the time you turn around and slice it, it's going to be too late. So what we do is we got the nice thinly sliced green onion there. Spring onion, sorry, is what you guys call it here. And I like to slice them on a bias to give it a nice long cut, just makes it look a bit nicer. And make sure that you push, slice, and then push. Slice, push, slice, push. To get a nice thin slice. And I like to use the whole green onion because the bottom is a bit more oniony, a bit more fibrous, a bit closer to what an onion's like. And then the tips are a bit more, you know, your greenery, bit thinner. But I like to use both because it gives it a nice contrast. All right, so we got our mise en place here. So we're just gonna pop that in there. All right. And the last thing that I'm gonna show you here while I've got this out like this is I'm gonna show you the chicken thighs that I did yesterday. So like I said, yesterday you had a whole chicken and you put it in the oven and you roasted it and then you carved it and then you didn't use it all and then you had the chicken thighs left over. So what we're gonna do with those chicken thighs. All right, so those are the chicken thighs here. And really, chicken thighs are my favorite part of the chicken because I think dark meat's much better. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna take the skin off the bone. It doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be pretty. So I'm just gonna take the meat off and I'm gonna save the skin. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the skin off and I'm gonna slice it really thin and add that to it as well because the skin is where a lot of the fat and a lot of the flavor is. So I'm gonna take the thigh, take the skin off. The dark meat I find is a lot more flavorful, more moist. Chicken breast tends to be overcooked because by the time that you cook a chicken and all of it's cooked all the way through, the breast can be cooked too much. So I'm gonna save that skin off to the side. I'm just gonna slice it and add it to the dish later, but I'm just gonna take the meat off. I'm just gonna kind of pull it apart. Just be careful you feel if you have any bones or any bit of cartilage kind of sneaking in here. But this is a really good way to use up a whole chicken. Maybe if you have a family of 4 or 5, a whole chicken might be gone in 2 seconds with a family. But you could do this with a turkey as well, but at my house, it's just me and my wife, so I tend to have leftover chicken. But it is a lot cheaper to buy a whole chicken and use it for different applications than just saying buying pre-done chicken breast because they're gonna charge you a premium for that. And if we're smart, we can buy the whole chicken at a fraction of the price. I think this whole chicken was, 3 or 4 pounds, which is what you could spend on 2-3 chicken breasts in the shop. All right, so I've got my little bits of chicken there. See, nice and chunky. I'm not really too worried about it being really fine. You could run your knife through this and kind of dice it up a little bit, but I'm not too worried about that because it gives it a bit of texture, a bit more interesting when we eat it. And then I've got the chicken skin there. I'm gonna throw these bones away, but my dog is gonna wanna go for them. He's coming to see what's up. So then I'm just gonna take this chicken skin. I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash. I see what you're doing, Cheeky. So we can kind of use this chicken skin as a garnish. There's a lot of flavor, a lot of the seasoning of the whole dishes or of the chicken is in the skin. So we don't want to waste that. A lot of people don't like the skin. I think the skin is the best part. I'm just gonna give this a nice slice through here. So that way when we finish the dish, we can kind of just garnish it a little bit with this chicken skin. Because we don't want any of this chicken to go to waste, okay? So if I was just to add that at the very end of the fried rice, That's so much flavor in that, so much flavor. You got the fat and the seasoning, the salt and pepper, because when you season a chicken, all of that goes on the outside. So we want to keep that. All right. So, just gonna put that in there. And that's it for the knife skills. So what I'm gonna do now is just give this a quick, we like to work clean, so I'm just gonna put this in the sink. And don't forget, feel free to ask any questions as we're going along. There's no stupid questions. I'm here to teach and I love to teach, so if you have any questions about anything that I'm doing, feel free to type it in the chat. All right, so since this is a nice wooden chopping board, I'm just gonna give it a quick rinse, and I'm not gonna soak it, I'm not gonna put it in the dishwasher because we don't want this to warp. All right, so I'm gonna switch back over to the other camera view here. Maybe. All right. So now that we have our mise en place ready, we can get ready to cook. Just kind of adjust this here. Does that look all right? So what I'm gonna do first is preheat my, I have a non-stick pan, and I'm gonna do the eggs in that first. I'm gonna get those cooked ahead of time. Make sure the dog is not jumping up and eating things that he shouldn't. So I'm gonna get that done ahead of time. And so when I finish the whole dish, I can just add the eggs to it. Sorry if I'm a bit close. All right. So it kind of depends on how many people we're cooking for. If we're doing 2 people to 4 people, I would say 2 to 4 eggs is fine. I'm gonna do 4 eggs just because I really like egg fried rice and I'm gonna eat a lot of it. And we're eating this as our main. So it's not egg fried rice and this, egg fried rice and that. It's gonna be the main part. It's gonna be the whole dish. It's gonna have the chicken in it, but it's just gonna be a nice big full thing of egg fried rice. So it's not an accompaniment to something else. So we're gonna cook those eggs first. I like to use a non-stick pan because eggs like to stick in everything. So you could do it in your wok. There's a few different techniques of where you can do it as you're cooking the egg fried rice in the pan, but I like to cook it separately and then add it in. All right. Bit of oil in there. I'm just gonna bring the camera in just a little bit so you guys can get a better view. Does that look all right for everybody? Do apologize, this is my first time doing anything like this. All right, so I'm just gonna crack a few eggs. All right, so we got those eggs cracked. We'll put a little bit of seasoning in there. What sort of oil? So when you're cooking in a pan, you only want to use vegetable oil. You don't want to cook with olive oil. Olive oil has a lower smoking point. So if you were to cook in a pan with olive oil, by the time that the pan was hot enough, that oil would be burning and smoking. So just your standard vegetable oil. Olive oil is great for salad dressings and things like that, but not really great for cooking. Good for like toasting bread and things, but not for cooking. It's also more expensive, so you don't want to waste your money on that. All right, so a bit of seasoning. And there are a few extra ingredients I'm going to be adding just because I have them at home. I don't expect you to have all these things. This is called togarashi. It's just a spicy kind of orange peel Szechuan seasoning. I'm just going to add that to the eggs just because I love it and I put it on everything. But don't worry if you don't have it. I won't judge. So we want to make sure that we season these eggs, because if we cook them and we don't season them, they're not going to taste as nice as they could do. We could season the whole thing at the very end, but those eggs inside the dish aren't going to be as nice as they could. So just giving them a nice mix here. And this is going to be done really, really quick. So we have just enough oil to cover the bottom of the pan. And I've got a non-stick spatula right here to stir it really quick. Just in. I can take it off the heat now. And literally, in seconds, we've got our scrambled egg for the dish. And the reason I like to take it off the heat is this doesn't need to be cooked all the way through, because when we add it to the rest of the dish, it's going to continue to cook a little bit. All right? So that's perfect, just like that. So I'm just going to take those eggs out of that pan just so that they don't continue to cook as much in that saute pan. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to break it up a little bit so it's not in big massive pieces. All right, and then we have the wok. Nice big wok. You can see that this is one of my Christmas presents. A nice big wok. The nice thing about a wok is you can control what you're cooking in there by where it's at. So if you push everything around to the edges and have the inside middle open, that's going to be hotter. So if you wanted to cook something a bit more in the center, you can push the rest of it out to the outside. But that's a bit more advanced in the wok cooking. All right. So we always want to make sure that when we're cooking, we use a hot pan and hot oil. The number one way to get food to not stick is to make sure that the pan is hot and that the oil is hot. Imagine if this is the pan and the oil is cold and we put a piece of food in there, it's going to go straight to the bottom. But if we have a hot pan with hot oil and we put a piece of food in, that oil is a protective layer between the food and the pan, so it's not going to stick as much. But if it's cold, it's just going to go straight to the bottom. But if it's hot, it's going to give it that protective layer. So we always want to make sure that we have a hot pan and hot oil. All right, so we're going to let that heat up. Once again, just some vegetable oil. And also, when I say a hot pan, it doesn't have to be smoking, screaming hot, full blast. So I like to do everything on a bit of a medium heat, because if I need to add some more heat to it, then I can. But I can turn it down or I can turn it up. If I start everything at a really smoking hot, full blast, more risk of burning it, okay? So I'm gonna just get my mise en place here, because once I start, it's gonna start going really quick. All right. All right, and now we're gonna go. So we got a nice hot pan. I'm gonna turn it down a bit. We've got, once we start cooking, it's gonna go quick. So this is gonna be the quickest part of the demonstration. So, shallots in. We're gonna get a little bit of color on them. What we're gonna do is try to sweat them. So we're just gonna try to get them translucent. All right. I'm gonna let those cook a little bit. The reason I'm not adding the garlic now is the garlic could burn before the onions are cooked. All right. We want the shallots to soften up a bit, or the onions if you're using onions. We just want them to soften up a bit, get a little bit translucent, and then we can continue on. All right, so next, peppers and the onions. And then, like I said, I would add some ginger. I don't have any fresh ginger because Morrison's didn't have any, so unfortunately I'm using some crushed ginger, but whatever you got to use, so just a little spoonful of that in there. You look. Getting a little bit of color, getting a light saute. Maybe a little teeny tiny touch more oil. We want to make sure that we have everything in the center, not burning on the sides. I wish you guys had smell-o-vision. It's smelling very nice. I'm going to add the chicken skin in now, just to give it a bit of crispiness. I wish you had smell-o-vision because it's smelling really nice. All right, so we've got the onions, the garlic, the shallots, things like that in there now. Giving it a bit of color. Next is the rice. So this is the rice that I cooked yesterday and cooled it down. Like that. And we want to use our spoon to break it apart. If you were to use rice that you just cooked, you would run the risk of having it being, mushy and hot and lumpy and nasty. So it's best to use rice cooked the day before. Just because the grains are going to be nice and separated. It's not going to be clumpy or lumpy or gummy. Alright, so nice. They're broken apart. Try to break up those big lumps together. Give it a nice mix up. Yes, I just like your message, so it's better because it has time to cook and cool. If I was to just cook this and put it in, it'd be wet. You'd run the risk of overcooking it. So you cook it perfectly and then cool it down, and then it's easier to control. And it's really good for doing leftovers as well. All right, so now I'm going to add the bit of chicken thighs. And I'm going to add the peas. These are frozen peas, so I'm going to add them in now so they have a little bit of a chance to defrost. I'm gonna let that cook for a bit. I'm not gonna add the eggs in right away because the eggs are pretty much all the way cooked and I don't want to overcook them. All right. The main nice thing about this fried rice is since the rice is cooked the day before, it's not in big lumps and bumps. It's nice and separated. Every grain is nice and separated from everything else, so it's not a hard clump and nice and mixed up. And it's a good way to use leftovers. All right, so basically now we're just warming it up because the chicken's cooked, the eggs are cooked, and we're just making sure it's warmed through. So what I'm gonna do now is gonna add the egg. And I'm gonna add my little secret ingredient here. This is MSG, pure MSG. So if you get this in the restaurant, it won't have this. But this is pure MSG. And it is the most amazing thing in the world. Don't be scared of MSG. But that's not on the ingredient list because that's my special secret ingredient. MSG makes things taste more savory, more meaty, just better. All right. I'm going to break that egg up. You can see here, looking very nice. We're getting some color on the rice. So now we can add some of the wet ingredients. And it's just going to be just a splash of wet ingredient. So just some dark soy sauce. Just a splash. This is toasted sesame oil. You can get MSG on Amazon. It's 2-3 quid for a bag of MSG. It will change your life if you start cooking with MSG. Put it in everything. It makes everything amazing. So this is just some toasted sesame oil. These are the optional ingredients. Toasted sesame oil is more of a garnish. We don't want to cook with sesame oil because by the time that we cook and we get up to a high temperature, it's going to kill the flavor. So it's more of a finishing touch. Spring onions in. I got one small ingredient here that I'm going to add, just because I can. This is mirin. This is Japanese sweet rice vinegar. But like I said, these are just all optional ingredients. Without any of these things, it would still be really nice. But my wife is used to it tasting really nice, so I have to keep it up for her. And then one little touch of salt and pepper here. So basically this will be finished once those peas are cooked all the way through because the peas are a little bit frozen. So once those peas are warmed all the way through, the egg is cooked, the chicken is cooked, the rice is cooked. So basically we're just warming those peas all the way through. So once that's finished, we're finished, all right? So, you can take our plate here and I'll adjust the camera a little bit. All right, now I'm gonna turn the heat off. All right, so I'm gonna give you I'm gonna plate this up first actually, and then I'll give you a nice close view. All right, so let's take a final look at this. Let me just move the phone here, flip this around. So, that's the view of the finished product. Nice green peas. The peas aren't overcooked, they're still nice and green. The chicken is nice and moist still because we just roasted it and just added it just at the end, so it's just warmed through. Just a touch of color with the soy sauce and the other seasoning, so it's not super dark and super wet. We just added a bit of a splash of those seasonings. And this is what you can do with leftover chicken and leftover rice. Make a dinner out of one, make 2 dinners out of 1. All right? So, that is the chicken thigh egg fried rice. Let's say that you didn't have chicken thighs or you just had chicken breasts. Thank you, Holly. You could use anything if you had a little bit leftover beef from your Sunday roast the day before, things like that. Not a rice lover. Rice is amazing. Maybe you're just learning how to cook it correctly. Nicely cooked rice is amazing, and a lot of people might not cook rice the right way. If you're not a huge fan of rice, maybe try getting a rice cooker, Penny, and then when you cook it, add a little bit of salt to it, to the water, and maybe a little bit of chicken stock, a little XO bouillon cube. That's what I do when I cook rice. I add a little bit of chicken stock to it and a bit of salt. It tastes amazing, and then you can use your leftovers for this. Okay? I'm gonna give a few minutes. If anybody has any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat. And if you don't have any questions, I appreciate you watching this. And thank you for joining me. I miss you all. I hope we can see each other soon. As you can see, the lockdown beard is getting very long, and the self-done haircuts are getting very crisp. And maybe I'll have a dog say goodbye. While if you're asking any questions, I'll have the dog come say hello. Stan, come here. Stanley will say hi before we go. Well, if anybody has any questions, they can type them. What do you think, Stan? You can sit down. Yes, you can get a rice cooker from Amazon for about 20-30 pounds. And then you can also steam your vegetables in it. Get it for Pa. You want to try? Yes, get a Chinese cleaver. It's my favorite knife to use at home. And this one thinks that all this is cooked for him. Yes, so as far as next week, because I have to do I have to do Morrison shops. If you have any requests or ideas of what you want to see, I'm thinking about next week doing Mexican, doing some guacamole, some pico de gallo. Mexican is one of my favorite things to cook. I was a chef in Chicago and learned how to cook Mexican food from my Mexican chefs that I used to work with. So I think Mexican is going to be next week. So, oh, my spice rack. You love my rack. Thank you. I appreciate it. But also let me know if you want any like mini tutorials knife sharpening. I did a little bit of knife skills. Just let me know if there's anything that you want to learn, any questions. I don't have a lot going on right now, so feel free to ask any questions. I'm thinking next week, like I said, it's going to be Mexican. So one last chance. Anybody have any questions before I go? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Whereas ABBA, I gotta start off easy. Yeah, you are the singing one. Maybe you can join me live and you can sing along with me. But does anybody else have any questions before I go? I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know the recipe seems quite simple, but the world is your oyster. Use whatever ingredients you want. You don't have to add peppers if you don't want to add peppers. It's really, once you know how to cook it, you can add anything that you want. All right? And that's it. If nobody has any more questions, I will leave you to start cooking yours. And thank you for joining. Good night, everyone. Good night.